Welcome into the third episode of Season 3 of the Educational Duct Tape Podcast. This is the 67th episode of the show and the 46th regular episode. I am so happy to be joined by Scott Nunes today. Scott and I will be discussing some strategies for using EdTech to build rapport with our students, but we'll go on lots of fun EdTech tangents as well. Let's get to it.
I'm Lindsay.
And I'm Kathy from the Kindergarten Kiosk Podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now.
Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect those of others.
Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to the Educational Duct Tape Podcast with Jake Miller.
Duct tape. Woo! Hello, Duct Tapers. Welcome into those of you who have been here for all 67 episodes, as well as those of you tuning in for your very first time. I'm so excited to bring my chat with Scott Nunes to you today. I first met Scott back in June 2019 at a Philly cheesesteak restaurant, and I just knew that meat sandwich bond would lead to Scott being on the show someday. Scott brings the excitement and passion for education as we talk about some rapport building strategies and activities today. Before we hear from Scott, though, let's check in with today's sponsor. Support for this episode comes from our friends at Pear Deck. As teachers, we know that when kids are truly engaged and excited about learning, it's the best feeling in the world. And in this new, remote setting, that can feel harder to achieve than ever before. Pear Deck is here to help. With Pear Deck, you can easily transform your presentations into engaging, active lessons using Pear Deck formative assessments and questions, and send them straight to student devices so they can participate in real time. Ready to get started? Pear Deck is offering educators free premium access and free webinars every day so that you can get going right away. Plus, they've teamed up with myself and other educators to offer special edition webinars to share insight from a variety of educator perspectives. Save your seat at their next webinar today. Head to peardeck.com/learn-pair-deck to register. That's peardeck.com/learn-pair-deck to register. So far this season, I am 0 for 3 on getting episodes out on their scheduled dates. And each of those times, I've been thinking, come on, Jake, you've got to get it out within a day or two of its scheduled date. Otherwise, you'll have to reschedule the hashtag #EduDuctTape Twitter chat, too. And it happened this time, too. This episode was due to come on September 2nd, and I just couldn't pull it off. I'm actually later on this one than I was on the previous two, too. The beginning of this school year is stretching me to my productivity limits, and I started to feel guilty about this episode not being ready on time. And then I realized, why am I letting something that's supposed to be fun, the podcast and the Twitter chat, make me feel stressed out? So that buck stops here. I've decided to put the Twitter chats on a long-term hiatus, at least for the extent of this school year, and to give myself grace on episode dates. In Season 1, it was every other Wednesday. In Season 2, it was every Wednesday. In Season 3, it's going to be whenever the HE double hockey sticks I can get episodes out there. I'll be aiming for every 2 weeks, but if I can't do it, oh well. I can't let myself feel bad about doing the best I can. And you know what? Neither should you. You're doing the best that you can this school year. Don't let yourself feel bad about it. It ain't perfect, but if it's the best you can, no one, including you, can ask for more from you. So yeah, no more hashtag #EduDuctTape Twitter chat. I'll miss them, but it's a load off for me, and I feel a lot better just having that eliminated from my workload. So I hope you understand. I will miss it. I know some of you guys will miss it, and hopefully someday we'll be able to get back to it. All right, before I climb up onto my soapbox, I'd like to share a little bit about my calendar with you. This October, I'll be a part of the San Gabriel Valley Q conference, which is online, as well as the online Fall Q and the online TCCA conference. Before then, I'll be running cohorts of my virtual course called Best Practices and Tools for Learning in All Settings workshop in partnership with Kent State University's Research Center for Educational Technology. There will be 3 separate cohorts. The September cohort starts today. You can actually join in late if you're soon enough. And then there will be October and November cohorts as well. When I asked 55 participants from the summer cohort about the usefulness of the course in their work as an educator, the average rating was a 4.85 out of 5, which makes me so proud. And then Then, as if that 4.85 isn't enough, on the question, how likely would you be to recommend a cohort of this workshop to a colleague, the average is 4.89 on the 5-point scale. So yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about it. I hate to brag, but I am proud of this, the effect and what these teachers have said and how it's impacting their school years that they've started up already. More details about this program, which covers my 4 MVPs of blended and remote learning, Flipgrid, screencasting, Edpuzzle, and Pear Deck or Nearpod, can be found at jakemiller.net/KSU course 2020. KSU as in Kent State University, course as in, this is a course, of course, 2020. Okay, that does it. Here we go. Let's get started. Oh, sorry. Hold on. Let me just grab my soapbox from over here. Yeah. There we go. That's perfect. Climb up on there. It's surprising that I only gave Bernard Roth's book, The Achievement Habit, Stop Wishing, Start Doing, and Take Command of Your Life, 3 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. Why is it surprising? Because I'm about to quote it for at least the 3rd time in one of my soapbox moments. When I read it, there were a handful of quotes that struck me so much that I included them in my list of potential soapbox moment topics. And then I bring that list up in Google Keep for those of you who have to know all of the EdTech going on, and I read down through that list. And each time, one of them resonates with me as the right one for right now. I've looked past this one a number of times, but today it feels perfect. It feels perfect because of the landmines that we're all walking into as remote teachers or hybrid teachers or socially distanced, masked up in-person teachers. This quote just fits. Here it is. In life, typically, the only one keeping a scorecard of your successes and failures is you. And there are ample opportunities to learn the lessons you need to learn, even if you didn't get it right the 1st or 5th time. Let's break that down. The first part. In life, typically the only one keeping a scorecard of your successes and failures is you. Yes, we need to remind ourselves of that. When the lesson goes poorly, when you accidentally click leave call instead of mic off, when your students click record a response instead of add a comment in Flipgrid, when you're presenting virtually to a few thousand people and forget to share your screen, when you forget to check the sharing settings on that Padlet, the only one keeping score is you. Those things were all things that I have done in the last month or so, but you wouldn't know that. Why? Because you weren't keeping score. I was. Typically, no one remembers the failure or even notices it other than us. So stop making yourself feel bad about it. But the other word in that first sentence, or that first part of that first sentence, is successes. No one is keeping score of those for us either. So you should. What went well today? What did you kick you-know-what on? What did you persevere through? Which goals and tasks did you cross off of your list? What awesome things did you do that weren't even on your list? What things made students smile? What things made students laugh? What things did your colleagues thank you for? Keep score for yourself. You deserve it. Let's look at the other part of that quote now. There are ample opportunities to learn the lessons you need to learn, even if you didn't get it right the 1st or 5th time. Whether it's a success or a failure again, or a failure again, or a success after multiple tries, learn the lesson. Give yourself grace on the failures, celebrate the successes, and learn from both of them. There are ample opportunities to do so. So, over these next few days, weeks, or months, remember that you're the only one keeping score for you. Learn from it and grow from it. But don't make yourself feel bad about it.
Today's guest.
All right, today's guest is Scott Nunes. Scott is an ELA teacher turned EdTech coach with a focus on PBL and amplifying student and teacher voices. Scott is an MIE, that's Microsoft and Education expert, and hopes to become a Google Innovator soon. He's going both ways, Scott. That's impressive. Additionally, he loves all things EdTech and 3D printing. And Scott has 2 podcasts. Not only does he do 2 things, Microsoft and Google, and he's wearing a Schoology shirt right now, he does 2 podcasts. Scott just can't stop at one of anything. He has 2 podcasts. podcast, the TNT Edtech podcast, and Education Today. You could find him on Twitter at Mr. Nunes Teach, and that's Nunes, Mr. Nunes Teach, or his podcast, his new podcast, Education Today, at anchor.fm/ed today, or his other podcast, which is with the awesome Matthew Ketchum at tntedtech.com. As always, both of those are in the show notes, but not in the show notes. Actually, here in your earbuds, in your ears right now, is our guest. Here is Scott. So welcome in, Scott.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Jake.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you here, man. So excited about the dual podcast. You're doubling my access to Scott's knowledge. Tell us about tell the listeners about him, since they maybe have heard TNT Edtech and maybe haven't heard the other new one. So how are they different? What do you do on them? Tell us about them.
Yeah, so TNT Edtech was the first one that I started with Matthew Ketchum, and that one just took off, much like Duct Tape. Like, it just really blossomed. I didn't intend for it to be what it is today, but I've been along for the ride. But I started noticing there were certain guests we would have on, or certain topics we would discuss, and I wanted to go deeper, but I really couldn't do that. And when I did double up or kind of had on the same kind of guest and went a little bit longer, our listenership waned a little bit. So our listeners really didn't like that. And so Education Today is really like a self-fulfillment project that I'm just kind of sharing. I love to dive deeper. So the first series I did is on women in education. Nice. My mom is one of my role models. I love my dad too, but in terms of education, my mom was really the driving force behind that. So I think it's really important to feature women in education. And some of my biggest role models in education are women too. So I wanted to have them on. And with Education Today, I'm grouping the guests and episodes in series, basically something like Serial. That's where I got the idea, like, oh, okay, I'm going to do this batch posting, nice. Collect all these podcasts, and then people can just kind of binge listen like a Netflix series, but with podcasts. So that's the idea behind that one. The next series is going to be people that I admire. And then I have two other series in the works. One is going to be Hometown Heroes, which focuses on educators highlighting people in their hometowns that have inspired them. And then I want to do one on just podcasters. So just educational podcasters sharing out their tips and tricks, because that's probably the number one thing I get asked on social media is like, how did you get started? What do you use for tools? How do you do it? All that kind of logistical stuff.
Yeah, us podcasters like geeking out about that stuff too, right? Like, well, tell me about that. I can see your mic a little bit in the video right now. What kind of mic is that, Scott? Or what are you editing with? And like we geek out about it. And you're right, people do, like, as they're starting one, they ask a lot of questions about it. So that'll be cool for people to be able to listen to kind of as a reference. But yeah, I like that idea of the serial idea of like sticking to a certain topic. And then so in that one, you're kind of having more like long form conversations with those people than you guys are on TNT, right? Because TNT is kind of more conversational based, and a lot of the ones I've listened to, you guys are kind of sharing different like tidbits in some of the episodes, right? Like this is something that like takeaway that you have, and this is a takeaway that Matthew has, and stuff like that. And so you kind of wanted some more wiggle room with Education Podcast, right? Right. Today,
and I just, if I just want to do one where it's just me talking, it's my podcast. I just do it. I don't have to check with anyone. I just do it, and whatever happens, happens. So I kind of like that.
Yeah. Now, Matthew doesn't feel like you John Lennoned him or anything, does he?
No. That's still my primary one. So when it comes down to edits or doing work, Education Today is number 2. So, I do still invest primarily in TNT Edtech. It's great. And we really balance each other out, like any good friendship. We complement each other. So his strengths are my weaknesses and vice versa. So I really think you get a holistic approach to EdTech and solving some of those problems and challenges by having both of us.
Both perspectives. Yeah. That's why I like doing the guests, but it's nice that you guys have those two, that you like a yin and a yang kind of thing with the way you guys talk about the tech in the classrooms and things like that, different perspectives.
Yeah. Thanks for saying that. 'Cause that's kind of what our hope is. And we want to reach more listeners. I'm always amazed. Like some people are really drawn to me, but then other people are really drawn to Matthew. And so we're just getting like double the listenership.
They're all some of the people are coming on like, I'm going to listen to that podcast with Matthew and that other guy.
Yeah.
The other guy ignores or annoys me, but I really like to hear Matthew. So they just skip over your parts.
I don't know about that Scott guy. That Matthew guy is where it's at.
And then people are like, did you hear Scott's got his own podcast? And they're like, I'm just here for the Matthew. But then other people are like, are you kidding me? Scott's the best part.
Yeah. So it's cool.
Okay. Well, even though we're kind of goofing around and being a little bit silly about your podcasting relationship with Matthew and who listens to who and all that stuff, we're going to play a game before we dive into it. Scott, you good with that?
I'm ready.
Okay, nice.
2 truths and 1 lie.
We're going to play a game of 2 truths and 1 lie. So Scott is going to give me 3 statements. 2 are going to be true. 1's going to be a lie. For those of you out there who don't know how to play 2 truths and 1 lie, I am going to then mess up the game and guess incorrectly and not ever figure out what the lie is. And Scott's going to have to explain to me how to play this game because even though it's my podcast, I still mess it up. But I don't know. It just happens. So hit me with it, Scott. What are your 3 statements?
Okay, my 3 statements. And these are a little different than some of the other ones I've heard on the show. So Here's number 1. I have been to Hawaii 13 times.
Okay.
So number 1. Number 2, I was a personal chauffeur for former Senator Al Franken.
What? Okay.
And number 3, I have been to 4 continents.
Wow, those are some interesting little factoids there.
Yeah.
I'm guessing, wow, I have no educated guess to use here. 4 continents. You know how many continents I've been to? 1.
No.
So that seems a little odd that you've been to 4. You're crushing me in the continent department right now. But I've also been to Hawaii 0 times, and I've chauffeured people other than my children and wife 0 times, and I've met Al Franken 0 times. So none of these are believable for me. I am guessing that the continents is the lie. You really were a chauffeur for Al Franken, and you've been to Hawaii 13 times, but you have not been on 14 continents or 4 continents. There are not 14 continents. 4 continents. It's a lie.
Oh, you were right. Yes! Nobody ever gets that.
What?
Yeah, no one ever gets that. So I've been to 3 continents, but not 4.
Well, 3's a lot. What are your 3?
So Europe, North America, and Australia.
What? I'm jealous, man. If I had to pick, I think my first destination I'd go to would be Australia. But also, second would probably be Hawaii, and third would be Europe. So you're definitely crushing me in that department. So 13 times to Hawaii. Why is that?
I love it. I try and go once a year when I can.
Wow.
It doesn't always happen, but we love it. We had just a really deep connection. I'll just touch on it briefly and give the reason why, and then we can move on. We lost a son early on, our first son. He was like 32 and a half weeks in utero. And we went to Hawaii to kind of heal. And just like the Hawaiian people were so welcoming, kind, just beyond measure. And so we felt such a connection. And so we try and go back whenever we can. It really feels like our second home. And, we have, friends that we consider family over there. And I just love it.
Wow. Yeah. What a interesting story of that connection and how it kind of was a healing place for you and then became a special place for you to go back to. That's interesting. Mm-hmm. Interesting. And then I'm sure probably not as comforting was being a chauffeur, but how did you end up being a chauffeur for Al Franken?
So that one's kind of tricky. So I was only a chauffeur for a day.
Okay.
So not a long time chauffeur. Good story with that one.
Quit after day 1. He was done.
Yeah, he was. I got lost, and he still tipped me. What a guy! Tipped me $20.
Nice.
And I got lost and made him late for his book presentation. So hey, to those out there who still tip when somebody does bad job, right. Kudos. But I worked at a hotel he was staying at, and rather than call him a cab, my manager was like, hey, do you mind taking this? I'm like, yeah, let's do it. So I drove him to his book signing. And then along the way, he let me ask him questions, and I asked him about being an author, and he gave me some great advice. He said, you know what? There's great editors out there, publishing companies. They're going to clean up your stuff. The number one thing you need to do is just sit down and write the book, and then go from there. Get some feedback on it. Share it out. If you need to fix stuff, fix it. But that's the first step. Like, they can basically take rubbish and turn it into gold with the editors they have. So I'm hoping soon to start writing something. So keep an eye out.
Man. Yeah, I'd love to hear that. But so while he's giving you this sage advice about being an author, you missed your turn, right?
Yeah, I forgot which way. I was so starstruck and so into conversation. I'm like, do I turn right or left? I'm like, nah, I turn right. No, it's not this road. And I had the right road, but it was left. I thought I had taken a different turn than I took. And so I had to turn back around. But he was still cool. He was like, I think you're going the wrong way. I think you should turn around. I'm like, yeah, I think you're right. I'm sorry, Mr. Franken.
Wow, what a story. And he was still cool, and he still gave you a tip, but he probably walked out of the car like after she
that guy,
God, son of a, you know what?
right
That's something or another. Oh man, wow, what a story. Man, okay, so here's a question that will be easier to answer than how do you get Al Franken to a book signing. Okay,
I'm ready.
Right, because you are an EdTech coach, an ELA teacher turned EdTech coach. So I've got an educational duct tape question for you, Scott. And for anybody that's a new listener, educational duct tape is my mindset, my weird metaphor that educational technology is at its best when we use it as a tool to solve problems rather than as a goal in the classroom. So it's a tool to solve problems, to meet goals, maybe to address a learning standard. So we always start with a question that a teacher might ask, and then address it with educational technology. So the question I have for you today, and I can tell you're probably good at this because you're a happy guy, you like to laugh, you like to talk, you like to chat. So I think this is probably a good question for you. How can I build rapport with my students? And while we talk about it, I kind of want to talk about it both. I think this would kind of naturally come up, right? But both worlds. I mean, like, it's the beginning of September right now as listeners are listening to this, and some of them are in one end of the spectrum, some of them are in the other, and some of them know that it might change in the near future. And I think the tools we're going to use are probably going to be the same, right? But I'm curious to hear what strategies and what tools and what ideas would you use for building that rapport?
So building rapport, I'll start with in the classroom. Just starting out, making it fun, inviting, high energy. You got to have this big sell. You have to make yourself attractive. You have to make your students want to be in your class. So that includes making it a safe place and, being real. Tara Martin talks about being real. I very much try to take that to heart and be as real as possible. So I share in my failures, just like the Al Franken thing, like, I failed, but it was still a good experience. So I share out with my students often, like day one or week one. I'm a failed graphic designer. That's why I'm teaching. I failed horribly at that. So I'm real in that sense. And I bring in EdTech in terms of like surveys. So doing a lot of Flipgrid videos, like checking in and working up their confidence to, turn off some of the filters sometimes, or show their face on the screen, or be a little more fluent, use the different tools. Like now the presenter coach feature that they have, that PowerPoint also had to kind of check and self-assess. And
is that in Flipgrid yet, or it has not rolled over to Flipgrid yet?
So I don't think it's rolled over yet, but it's coming. It's coming. So that's one I want to use. And if I were in the classroom this year, that's what I would use for sure. Just one added layer to give them some feedback, because that's key. You need feedback, and you need these checks for understanding. And so essentially I'm shifting what I did in the classroom and just making it that much more digital. So I have a Wakelet collection out right now, digital checks for understanding, and it has some some ways you would typically do that. There's some articles on that. And then I put a digital spin on it. Things like showcasing examples where they're doing like a gallery walk or 4 corners for a check for understanding using Jamboard. But you could use anything. Doing a sketch and tell, an EduProtocol in Nearpod. Instead of doing it on the board or Cyber Sandwich, we're going to do that in Nearpod now. And then I've been like telling my teachers now on the EdTech side, record your lessons just in case something happens. And also give your feedback that way so that students can go back, review it. They get to see your face. It creates that personal touch. If it's all digital in the form of text, or just audio, it's not the same. It's okay sometimes, right? Coming from a podcaster, but you need that personal touch. So do that as much as possible. And, even, calling your students like by phone, calling the families. It's a lot of work. I get that. But it is some of the most impactful work. So that's something I started doing last year for feedback, calling not just when something goes bad, but when something goes good. And that's something I still do and encourage my teachers to do.
Yeah. Look, okay. That was a lot. That was a lot of great stuff, Scott. Yeah. Like, did you have notes? Did you have bullet points?
No, but you said I could talk. And
all right, just go. Wow. Well, okay. Let's go back through and break some of those down then, because I love them. There's some great ideas in there. So, one of the first things you mentioned was surveys. What tools do you use for surveys? What do you recommend for that?
So I like Google Forms. You could use Microsoft Forms. And then I do Flipgrid for surveys. So model, I do it, and then talk about how they can do it, and then they do it. So it's the I do, we do, you do model.
So when you're doing with Flipgrid, you're not necessarily getting like a bar graph of data of responses, but you're asking a question and you're hearing from all of your class, right? Now, when you do that, are you thinking like surveys of just for fun, like which one of these is your favorite TV show right now or something like that? Just ways to build rapport?
Yeah, so I'll have a couple fun questions. I have 3 questions. So I'll do a fun one, like what's your favorite food? What's your favorite type of music or genre or band? But then I go a little deeper, and they're very unsuspecting of this last one. And this one is gold. It's the best answer I get all year, bar none. And I just ask them to either share out a time in life that they were successful or a time in life that was a big challenge. And then I add on, have you overcome that challenge yet? And I get a spread of answers all the way from, hey, I made the cheer team. Here's what it was like. I'm doing soccer. I'm trying to get on the national team, things like that, to my dad passed away. And those are the ones that really hit, or I'm in the foster care system and I'm in the process of being adopted. And that they are so real and vulnerable in those moments. So I try to be vulnerable too, because that helps me get to know them and meet them where they are. Because I know if, hey, your dad is recently incarcerated, that's got to be really hard. I haven't had to deal with that. I'm going to give you some grace on your deadlines. I'm going to check in with you a little bit more often, maybe nudge you a little bit, but back off if you're not turning in stuff, and just let you know you matter more than the content. The content matters, no doubt, but people matter more.
Right. A lot of the times when we talk about building rapport, like I think the thing that people tend to think of as like doing some icebreakers and learning some facts about the kids and learning how to pronounce everybody's names, which are all important things. And
those are good too.
And good things. But what rapport really means, and I just looked at here, I'm going to quote the definition that comes up in Google search: a close and harmonious relationship in which the people or groups concerned understand each other's feelings or ideas and communicate well. So that understanding each other's feelings or ideas, that means that there is a shared respect, and that word harmonious in there, right? So by asking them that kind of question and then showing, like, you got to respond back to that, of course, which I know you are. By doing that, the kid goes like, oh, they actually kind of care about me, right? And then he's showing his vulnerability with things, and like, yeah, I have empathy for him too. So that really does build rapport, which goes a long way later when you try to give that kid some feedback on something maybe he did wrong behaviorally, or on an assignment, or a skill that he needs to brush up on. He knows that's coming from a place of, this person cares about me, right? And I care about him, and I trust what he's saying to me. And we have trust built between us to build off of.
Yeah, that trust is so important. And if you ever break it or they break it, it's hard to get it back. And, if they're the ones that break it, give them some grace. And if it's you, really apologize and try to get it back. We have good days, bad days. There's been times where I haven't been so patient with the kiddo. And I regret that. And I'll come back and I'll say, you know what? I really messed up yesterday. Will you please forgive me? And like 80% of the time, 90%, they'll say, yeah, no worries, Mr. Nunes. Like, I know, I get it. And then sometimes they still hold the grudge, and hey, that's on them at that point. Yeah. It really hurts them. I still continue to reach out. It's not like, on my end, there's a barrier, and it's really unfortunate. It is saddening when that does happen. And I just reflect and then try and do better the next time. And you know what? I do get better each time. And so that's how I kind of forgive myself when I do mess up. Like, hey, I'm just not going to do that mistake again. I'm going to learn from that.
Yeah, that's big of you too to do that. But it's also, as you're talking to the kids about that slip up or whatever it might have been, that also is a way to build rapport too, right? Because it shows the kids that you're human, you're willing to admit to your mistakes, you care enough to apologize, you care enough to try to repair what happened. There. Scott, I have to apologize though. While you were saying that, you're saying these heartfelt, wonderful things, and I started to giggle. I don't know if you noticed, I started to giggle, and I started to giggle because I saw in my webcam right behind me on the wall. The listeners can't see it, but you could see it. Do you see that red flag there hiding there, Scott? So just before we recorded, I played a game of Nerf gun capture the flag with my kids. And they always hide a flag in the basement, which is where my office is. And I always hide a flag upstairs in one of the bedrooms. And we have to try to capture those flags. Well, the last game, they found my flag and won, and I never found their flag. But now
there it is.
It's right behind me. So there's my flag.
That's perfect.
I'm going to go upstairs and tell them I found your flags, you little stinkers.
I got you.
These kids. Okay. You were talking and I literally just turned my head just enough. And I was like, there's the flag. Classic. Okay. All right. No, another thing I want to ask about is you brought up the Presenter Coach. So I haven't used Presenter Coach yet. I've learned about it through PowerPoint. And then during the Flipgrid Live back in, I think it was the end of July, I heard about it coming to Flipgrid too. And so you are an MIE expert. So I know you know about it. So can you break down? We got a lot of listeners. I've never really studied the listeners to see how many are Google and how many are Microsoft. But I'm assuming from what I'm gathering that we've got a majority of Google folks out there listening. So tell us about what Microsoft PowerPoint's Presenter Coach is.
Yeah. So essentially what this is a built-in add-on that you can access through Microsoft PowerPoint. Mm-hmm. And it allows you to get quick feedback. So if you're speaking too slow, it'll let you know you're speaking too slow, pick up your pace. Mm-hmm. And it'll offer up some generic suggestions. If you were speaking too fast, likewise. And Mike Tholfsen, he does a really great job of, speeding up his speech and slowing it down to demo how that works. You can find that video on his LinkedIn, social media, or YouTube to really see that in action. And if they throw in an expletive, I taught in high school, you know what? The best of us, it happens sometimes. It will correct them and offer an alternative word, which is great. So instead of saying the S word, maybe you say stuff. Right. Something like that. So it's really beneficial, and it'll let them know about their volume, I believe, as well. Yep. And then for me, when I tested it, even as a podcaster, I'm sad to say I use a lot of ums and filler words. So when I speak, I have a lot of that. So I still have lots of room for improvement. So that's something teachers can use too. If you're doing visible learning, John Hattie's work, and you're doing some micro teaching, recording yourself, hey, run it through the Presenter Coach.
Yeah, that's a great idea. So I got to tell you, as soon as you said about the filler words, Scott, I listened to everything you said after that, and there were no filler words in there. You were perfect. I might not be as good, right? I might not be as good as Microsoft Presenter Coach, but I didn't identify any. You were good. I give you a pat on the back for that. It was good. But yeah, I just ummed.
Now you're going to catch them all.
Accidental. It's like Pokemon.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's now coming in the near future to Flipgrid. So, and the kid can turn it on or off, was my understanding, because that would be difficult for some kids and difficult in some situations. Like you're talking about that situation where you ask the kids, what's a big challenge for you? And a kid's telling about a really difficult situation. You don't want Flipgrid saying like, dude, you're saying a lot, right? Right. Or speed it up, buddy.
Or maybe stop crying. Right.
A little bit too much. Right. But at times they could turn it on, and you could even differentiate it. Like some of your kids that are ready for it can have it on, and some kids can have it off. And it's a private thing. And it's nice with Flipgrid, you could record as many times as you want before submitting it. So that checker can identify those things, and they can go, oh, okay, I'm going to try it again without those filler words. And 9 times out of 10, you're going to do it better the second time anyhow, because of that practice in there. So that's a nice feature. And it's free in PowerPoint, right?
Yes, it's free. So I love that. Just like a lot of Google stuff is free, a lot of the Microsoft stuff is free too. Yeah,
and it'll be free in Flipgrid too, because that's how Flipgrid rolls. That's how they roll, right?
Yeah. Yep. Love it.
Cool. Okay, so then you mentioned the digital checks for understanding Wakelet collection. Can you send me a
I'll send you a copy of that.
Perfect. Yeah, we'll get that in the show notes. And then I loved your shout out for Jamboard there too. And you talked about doing the 4 corners activity in there, because I was thinking like, what's a way to do this in the remote learning classroom? How can we do that 4 corners activity? And Jennifer Gonzalez, Cult of Pedagogy, had a post recently about doing it in Google Slides, I believe is what she was doing, and having the kids drag their name around the slide. But yeah, you could totally do that in Jamboard too. So the kids make like post-it note with their name on it, and you label a corner to be different things, and they just drag over to them. And I think that's also a good activity for learning for responsible use of educational technology, right? Especially in that situation.
Yes, that dig sit piece.
Right, because the kids want to they could just shake their thing all over the screen, right? And they want to move, and then as the teacher's talking, move again. As the teacher's talking, move again. So it gives you a nice like non-academic opportunity to build those norms of what you do in your classroom or what you do in a digital platform of don't move somebody else's postcard around. Don't be zigzagging your postcard all over the screen or posting it all over the screen. So good for that too. And then you mentioned a gallery walk. Do you do that in Jamboard too?
Yeah, you could do that in Jamboard. So I love gallery walks. I used to do the big giant Post-it notes, around the room. And then last couple of years, I've been doing it with the one-to-one devices where they set them up around the room and people go. And then last year I added on the Flipgrid QR codes. And now, we could do it in Jamboard. We could do it in Google Slides, still, collaborative slide type thing. You could do it in Microsoft PowerPoint. Yep. So if your district isn't Google, hey, you could do it in PowerPoint as well. And you can offer so many variations there as well. You could still have them do the QR codes, and you could, do Easter eggs and, hide them like in your Bitmoji wall or whatever you got. There are lots of ways to do the gallery walk, but in Jamboard specifically, they just put their items on sticky notes, their thoughts. You ask them a question, and it also works great for, you could flip it, and that could be like an exit ticket or an entry ticket. Hey, slap your thoughts on yesterday's video on this Mark Rober video, shark smelling the blood, something like that.
Right. Yeah. And so these are things like I mentioned earlier with a Rapport, that we tend to think of it as getting to know you activities, which are part of Rapport. But another part of Rapport is just the kids seeing that you value their opinion and that you are checking for their understanding and respecting their understanding. So things like gallery walks and stuff like that, even though, hey, it might be just a gallery walk about something you're learning about in class, like by you doing that, you're showing that their knowledge and their stance and their understanding of things is valued. And that is a rapport builder. And then giving them the chance to reflect on each other's things, like in a gallery walk, does the same thing too, right?
Right. And if you really want to up your game and you have time for it, you could do a virtual gallery walk, something like Jamie Donnelly would do, and do it in AR or VR.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Wow, a virtual gallery walk. That would be really cool. Yeah, I never thought about that. See, I was gonna say like, oh, we could do this in Wakelet or Padlet too, which we could.
Yeah,
but then you're dropping the bomb with
too.
VR versions of it. Man, you win. All right, Scott. He has more podcasts than me. He has more kids than me. He's been to more continents than me. He's been to Hawaii more times than me. He's taken Al Franken on a drive and gotten him lost more times than me. And he beats me on this too with his VR idea, Scott. That's really cool.
Oh, have you ever shared what you shared with me off camera? I don't know if you want to share with these guys, but that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
I'll trade Al Franken for your experience with the celebrity.
You could have Al Franken. So I've got a hoop behind me, a Michael Jordan basketball hoop, and it's from the time I won a trip to Michael Jordan's basketball camp as a somewhere between 5th and 6th grade. So yeah, I got to meet Michael Jordan. I didn't get to drive his car or get him lost on the way to a book signing or anything. But Michael Jordan is up here and Al Franken is a little bit lower. Sorry.
Al Franken's a little bit below.
Yeah, I do win on that one, but you win on all of the other things. But thank you. You know what, Scott? That was a really nice way to build rapport with me, showing that you really valued something I said and everything, right?
Yes.
Really, nice job, buddy. So then you mentioned also to EduProtocols. We were talking about our buddy John Carippo before we started recording, and you're name dropping now to his work with Marlena Hebern on the EduProtocols. And you named 2 of them. You named Sketch and Tell and Cyber Sandwich. And I've got to be honest, I just got the EduProtocol book like a week ago, and I have not read it yet. And so I'm familiar with a handful of them, but I'm not familiar with either of those. So tell me a little bit about Sketch and Tell first.
Okay, Sketch and Tell. Really quick, you have 2 boxes. You could do this on Jamboard too. And one is labeled Sketch, the other one is labeled Tell. You provide the students with a set of resources, typically links to websites, and they go in and they typically work in pairs. You could set this up in Google Slides or Microsoft PowerPoint. So one slide has the links they'll need. One slide is student A's and the other slide is student B's. And they each work on their own independently for about 5 minutes, come back. They answer a series of questions too. So you ask them to look for specific things. Like if you're doing Lewis and Clark, you're studying them. Somebody will, study all of the places they went. And then somebody else could track all of the volcanoes that they explored in the Pacific Northwest. Okay. And talk about all those, like Mount Hood, and label those. And then you regurgitate or share this information in the Google slide in the Tell part. And then in the Sketch part, you have an associative drawing. So it's pretty cool. And the artistic kiddos, they get really into the draw part. Like they do mini Mona Lisas there. In that 5 minutes. It's amazing what they do.
So is one kid sketching and one kid's telling, or are both kids sketching?
So they each do both parts. But you could, right? You could have one sketch, you could have one tell. And that could be a really good way to have some mixed abilities work together. And that also builds rapport. Having some kiddo who's really good at art, but isn't that interested in the academic side, but you have the academic kiddo coming up with all the facts and sharing those, and they present together. Now you have like buddies for life. It's like we connected over Lewis and Clark, man. Yeah. Friends for life. Let's go.
They'll call each other for the rest of their lives, Lewis and Clark. The one kid gets to be Lewis, the other kid gets to be Clark, and they're like,
exactly.
What's up, Lewis? What's up, Clark? They'll get in a fight over who gets to be Lewis and who gets to be Clark. I don't know which one's the cool one. Do you know who's cooler, Lewis or Clark? This is a game
I think Clark. Yeah, but I don't know.
This is like,
I don't know. It's a close one.
Sometimes we play the game on the show. Which of the following would be less torturous? So Scott, which of the following would be less torturous? Being Lewis or being Clark?
Oh, I think being Clark because of Superman, Clark Kent. That's what I was thinking of too.
I was thinking Clark Griswold.
Superman's cool. Oh,
those are both cool Clarks, though.
Yeah,
there are some cool Lewises out there, but not as cool as Clark Kent and Clark Griswold. For sure.
Yeah.
You could tell we're recording late in the evening because I'm goofy here asking goofy questions right now. I'm like if you If you put all 67 episodes or how many of the podcast, line them up and try to guess which ones were recorded in the evening and which ones were recorded in the morning, I guarantee you could tell. Like the sillier they are, the later at night it was recorded. The morning ones, I'm normally like, "How you doing? Yeah, let's talk about some EduProtocols. Okay, great. This sounds really good." But the evening ones, I'm like, "Hey, Lewis or Clark, which one?" Okay, so then Cyber Sandwich is another EduProtocol, and so the EduProtocols, for people who aren't familiar with them, they're a series of like ready-made kind of lesson recipes. Like you just add content, right? It's like a mix where you say just add water. This is just add content. So Sketch and Tell is the same in my science classroom as it would have been in your ELA classroom. It's just you're putting different content in it. And a Cyber Sandwich works the same way, where I'm putting science content into it and you're putting ELA content into it. But what I like what you're doing with both of them is by doing them in Nearpod or Pear Deck or something like that, as you suggested, is you're showing the kids that you value different ways of expressing their thoughts and things like that. So they're not expressly rapport building activities, but any kind of stuff like that where the kids aren't doing a worksheet or aren't forced to write and not do the other things, right? Where the kids have some choice and some power and some expression. Those do build rapport, especially if they see that you're listening to them and hearing what they're saying and sharing in it, you know?
And you get some unique answers. So the Cyber Sandwich is you have you set up a Venn diagram, basically. Like you compare Big Mac and the Whopper. Mm-hmm. You know, what are the similarities? What are the differences? And I would do this with all my ELA classes. Each class would be different. You get some that are really into it and give you like the calorie count or the phone number, right? That's a difference. They got a different phone number, different website. Like, oh, I wouldn't have thought about the calorie count. And they got really specific, like, oh, okay, the Big Mac has pickles. Oh, wait, no, it doesn't. The Whopper has pickles. The Big Mac does not. You know, Big Mac has the Thousand Island dressing.
That's true. I know that.
And the extra bun, they get so into it sometimes. So it's really cool. Or comparing characters. You could do it with sports, basketball and baseball, right? Mm-hmm. Or Jordan versus Kobe. Ooh, right? That'd be a good matchup.
Yep. Today's super secret code is FLAG, as in the flag that I noticed behind my desk during the interview. So if you would like a certificate for a contact hour of credit for listening to this awesome podcast episode with Scott, head to eduducttape.com/certificate and type in the super secret code FLAG. Two other ideas for this that I want to shout out there too, which are kind of beginning of the year rapport building activities, which are kind of that traditional version of rapport that I was talking about, that are like the getting to know you kind of things. Like there's two pieces here, and you kind of talked about one of the other pieces, which was developing it throughout the year with the way you do activities and things like that. Even though you're right, we could do these Sketch and Tells and Cyber Sandwiches and things like that about just fun things to kind of develop that classroom environment. But two other ones I want to shout out to is I'm really excited about Gimkit's Kitroduce Yourself. Have you seen that activity that Gimkit does?
No, I need to check that out.
So they use the Kit Collab, which is where the kids can collaborate on the Kit questions, and the kids make take a selfie and add in something to match with it. And the basic way to do it is your selfie and your name. And then so when you play the Gimkit, everybody sees the picture and then sees 4 names from the class. They have to click on the right name. But the other option is, instead of putting in your name, maybe you put in Michael Jordan fan or whatever, you know, like, and you're matching up the kid's selfie or their name with a fact about them or something like that. So that's in Gimkit. I gotta say though, tonight I've had like a tweet storm going today, because I just discovered last night that Gimkit changed their free version, and now the free version, you're limited to only five users in a game, which is a bummer. I understand companies you gotta pay the bill somehow, and you could do a 30-day free trial. Everybody automatically gets it. Mm-hmm. So if you're still using the free trial, go out there and try a Kit collab and do the Kitroduce yourself. If you're not, I guess you got to consider paying for it. And it's a good price and a great tool.
It is. It's a really fair price. I went ahead and I paid. The price for the year.
I feel bad for teachers that have to do that. I'm fortunate at the school that I work at that we have access to it, but for teachers that are like, hey, this is huge in my classroom and the kids love it.
It saved me. Right? I don't mind paying it out of pocket. It was well worth it.
And they're a good company. I was disappointed about the changes, but they're a great company, and they gotta pay the bills, and they make a great tool, and they deserve to be rewarded for it. The other thing too, we talked about Flipgrid earlier, but one thing that I'm doing this year, at the point that we're listening to this, I've already done it, but at the point that we're recording this, I haven't yet done it, is asking my kids to respond to a Flipgrid post and tell me their name. What's your name? How do you pronounce it? What's the story of your name? Like, does it have a meaning, or does it have a backstory or a fun story that goes with it, to help me kind of remember it? And then I'm also going to ask them what their preferred pronoun is, if they have a preferred pronoun other than what they naturally present as, so that I can kind of get to know the kids. Because, you know, I've done it so many times over my years in education, where by the end of the year, I'm still feeling not confident in, like, am I pronouncing that kid's name right? Right. And like, that is not acceptable, right, Jake. Like, I can't do that. So that's one way I'm going to make sure I'm not doing that. Get that Flipgrid in, learn those names, and look at those names over and over again. Because then when that kid first, like when I first see them in a Zoom call, and hopefully someday in person, I'm going to be able to confidently say, hey, what's up, Scott? And no, that's not Scott, right? I know how to pronounce Scott. And then it's not Nunes, it's Nunes, right?
Right. Yeah.
Nice. Well, Mr. Nunes, I am so honored that you're on the show today, and I am so psyched to be preparing some show notes for the listeners that have like 12 really rad ideas that you shared today, man. So thank you so much for being on the show with us.
No, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. It's a great show.
Thanks, man. And same to you with the TNT Edtech podcast and with the Education Today podcast. I hope people are going to run out there and check them out and follow you on Twitter and check out the great work you're doing, because you're doing lots of it, man.
Yeah, please do. Thanks again.
Yep. Thanks for being on the show. So glad I got to have Scott on the podcast. Scott is such a great guy, such a positive force in education, and I hope you go check out his social media and both of the podcasts that Scott is involved with, because as you could tell from listening to him today, he has a lot of passion for supporting educators in the learning environments, and he's a lot of fun to chat with. But even more fun than chatting with Scott, well, maybe not, but also fun, is the celebration of the adjacent possible. That is the part of the show where I get to share from you, the Duct Tapers, and there are 3 things that happen in this part of the show. So if you want your voice or your words or your name to be a part of this, there are 3 possible ways to do that. The first of which is submitting an Apple Podcast review, which I actually have no new ones to share right now. So if you share one in the next 2 weeks or so, you'll almost certainly be featured in the next podcast episode. And the second thing is to tweet a funny or fun or interesting tweet after you listen to the episode. Instagram posts and things like that work as well. And then the third thing is to participate in the Educational Duct Tape Flipgrid grid, and I have 2 posts from that grid to share in today's episode. First, we'll go with the hashtag EDU Duct Tape tweets, and the one that I want to share this week comes from friend of the show, Brad Schreffler. Brad is a good guy, good dude, and he shared after listening to the episode, love this episode of Jake Miller Tech's hashtag EDU Duct Tape podcast. Sure, at D Lanier was great, but the I'm bleeding post-it was great. My son doesn't write notes like this anymore, and then the LOL face. And then he had a question, which I enjoyed this question. What tech tool could she have used to interact with you during recording? LOL. And my suggestion was that she probably should have used Classroom Q to tell me that she needed help after I was done talking to D in the podcast episode. But yeah, I think that's one thing that I will never forget is Parker, my daughter, bringing a post-it note to me telling me that she was bleeding because she had a cut in her ankle while I was recording with D. Oh gosh, memories. I'll never forget that one. Up next, let's jump over to the hashtag EDU Duct Tape Flipgrid grid to see what listeners of the show have to say. So in the D Lanier episode, I shared a little bit of audio from friend of the show, Brian Carpenter, where Brian shared a question he had about how at his current school, he wants to use Google Sites for students to create portfolios, but students are prohibited from making sites. So he wondered, could the teacher make the site and then the student add stuff to it? And I said, I don't know, Brian, you're going to have to go test it out. But I also said, Duct Tapers, if you know, let us know. And I posted the link to Brian's Flipgrid video and said, if you know the answer or have some info on this, head over to this link and reply directly to Brian so that Brian knows, and then I'll share it in the podcast too. So we did have somebody reply. So here is Vicki Hypel, and Vicki, take it away.
Hey, Jake and Brian. It's Vicki Hypel here from Kalispell, Montana. I teach biology in Big Fork, Montana. And what you're suggesting is what a couple of the teachers at my school actually do. And so that's what I've done in the past as well. I create the site. I make some of the students that I want on that site collaborators. So which students from my class that I want on there, I make them collaborators, and then they add to the site. And then when you press publish, you get all of their changes on the side. And so if you're not sure if they've made changes that you want on their change that you haven't been able to check yet, you're certainly able to check that before you press publish and edit it yourself. So yes, that's a possibility. I don't remember, to tell you the truth, because it was quite a while ago. I don't remember if our admin had to set anything different with the editing features. But again, our kids cannot make sites, but they can collaborate and edit them. So I hope that helps, and good luck.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Vicki. Vicki reached out and answered that question, and it sounds like good, promising news for Brian. So now I'm hoping that Brian will test it out and let us know if it worked or not, because it's good to hear that it is potentially possible that it will work for him. But as many of you probably already know, there's a lot of intricate settings in the Google Admin Console, so it's possible that different things are set differently in different school districts, and what worked for Vicki might not work for Brian. But Brian, I hope we'll find out that it does work for you. By the way, both Vicki and Brian are regular listeners of the show who I've heard from regularly. I would love to start hearing from you regularly. And so here you have 3 different ways that we can hear from you. One is social media with the hashtag #EduDuctTape. The second is Apple Podcast reviews. And the third, as Vicki and Brian have showed us, is by heading over to that educational duct tape Flipgrid grid. Now, speaking of people who have interacted with the show before and people who have not, here we've got a listener who we have not heard from that I recall, who sent in something to the educational duct tape Flipgrid grid, and she's got a question that I hope you guys can answer. So take it away, Carmen.
Good morning. My name is Carmen, and I am a 5th grade teacher in a small little school in Central California. And today is my first day of school, actually. I just wanted to say thank you for your podcast, and I love listening to all your topics and your speakers, and you guys have been offering a lot of great tips. I have a question for you and your listeners to see if maybe you could figure this out for me. When I'm assigning assignments in Google Classroom, sometimes I will take the time to fill out everything, the title, the instructions, my attachments, the due date, and then I mean to schedule it, but I forget. And sometimes I just click assign. So when I want to go back and edit it and schedule it for, the next day or 2 days later, whatever it may be, I can't change it to schedule. So I could edit everything else, but it looks like the only way around it is starting all over again. And I just wanted to know if there's a quick fix for that. All right, thanks.
All right, Carmen, thank you for that message. So I don't think there's a quick fix so much, and I think that your experience in Google Classroom, the way it works, which is you can't kind of pull back an assignment once you've posted it and turn it into either a draft or a scheduled assignment or anything like that. It's either assigned or it's deleted essentially at that point. However, here's what I would do if I were in your shoes. It's kind of a hack. By the way, if I were in your shoes, I'd tell you how cute your shoes are. Those are very nice shoes. But here's what I would do if I were in those shoes. I would leave the assignment up temporarily. I would go back in to make an assignment. I would click reuse post. I would select that assignment, and then that new version that I was making a copy of, I would schedule. And then once that one was scheduled, I'd go back and delete the one that had already been made. Not an elegant solution, and it does leave you kind of in this middle stage where you have that accidental assignment posted there for a little bit, and it's not quite as quick as just, unposting it and making it scheduled, but at least it's better than completely recreating it. So Duct Tapers, this is your chance to tell Carmen if you know something better that she could do here. So I will put a link to Carmen's Flipgrid post into the show notes. And if you have a better idea for what you could do there, I would love to hear it too. So please click on that link, share that idea with her, and then I will more than likely share it on the podcast in 2 weeks or so whenever I get around to it. So that does it for today's episode of Educational Duct Tape. I hope that you enjoyed yourself. I hope you learned a lot from Scott, and I hope you'll interact with the show in some of those ways that I mentioned earlier. As I've been saying so much lately, especially over the last 6 months, which have been so difficult for everybody, but extra difficult for educators. As a parent, I appreciate you. As a teacher, I am proud of you. And as a podcaster, I'm grateful for you. I'm adding that one in today. I will see you again in another fortnight-ish whenever I get around to editing our next episode. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a duct taper, and I will see you soon.
Thank you for listening to the Educational Duct Tape Podcast. Please consider rating and reviewing the show on your favorite podcast app. #EduDuctTape.